Westernspring Television. Ours it is.
Here are the top stories of the news. CBN denies reports of devaluing the naira to about 630 naira to the dollar. Presidential Election Petition Tribunal resumes hearing of petition filed against Tinubu's victory. On the foreign scene, President Volodymyr Zelensky presses case for Ukraine to be part of NATO military alliance. Good afternoon and welcome to Spring News at 12 on Westernspring Television. My name is Evelyn Ohiola. The Central Bank of Nigeria has reacted to reports claiming that it has devalued the naira to about 630 naira to a dollar. The report of the currency devaluation was earlier reported by one of the national dailies. However, in statement this morning, the bank's acting head of corporate communications, Dr. Isa Abdulmumin, described it as falsehood. He said the reports, which in the imagination of the newspaper is exclusive, is replete with outright falsehoods and destabilizing innuendos. He noted that it reflected the potentially willful ignorance of the said medium as to the workings of the Nigerian foreign exchange market. Now to legal matters. The Presidential Election Petition Court has resumed the hearing of petition filed against the victory of President Bola Tinubu. The court had to step down hearing on the petition filed by Peter Obi and the Labour Party for 10 minutes. The petition was stepped down by the court following poor schedule of documents being sought to be tendered to establish the allegations of malpractices during the presidential election. At the resumed hearing, the court discovered that the documents were not properly scheduled as ordered by the court. Some discrepancies were uncovered while rendering the documents from the 23 local government areas of Benue State. The court subsequently stepped down hearing of the petition to 10 minutes and asked the legal team to refile the schedule of documents in line with the provisions of the pre-hearing court. Meanwhile, the Federal High Court in Abuja has held that the People's Democratic Party (PDP) can either suspend or expel former Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike as its member, but must comply with due process. Justice James Omotosho stated this yesterday while delivering judgment in the suit filed by Mr. Wike to stop the PDP from either suspending or expelling him without according to him fair hearing. The judge ruled that suspending or expelling Mr. Wike without according him the right to defend himself would breach his fundamental rights as enshrined in the constitutions of the PDP and that of the country. Justice Omotosho held that though the party has the right to suspend or expel its members, such action must be taken with compliance with its own law. To politics, Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State has taken over the baton of leadership from Kebbi Governor Senator Atiku Bagudu as the new chairman of the Progressive Governors Forum. Yobe State Governor Mai Mala Buni introduced his Imo State counterpart as the new chairman of the APC's forum during a visit to the party's national secretariat in Abuja. Governor Buni made the introduction when he led a team of the governors elected under the platform of the APC to meet with the party's National Working Committee chaired by the national chairman, Abdullahi Adamu. In his remark, the APC chairman congratulated the governors on their victory in the March governorship polls. He advised them to settle down to work and bring good governance to the people of their respective states. It was gathered that Governor Uzodinma was elected via consensus during a strategic meeting of the forum yesterday. Sly Ezeokenwa has emerged the new national chairman of the All Progressives Grand Alliance, APGA. His emergence was announced yesterday at the APGA National Convention in Awka, the Anambra State capital. Mr. Ezeokenwa was sworn in alongside the newly elected national officers of APGA in the presence of Anambra State Governor Chukwuma Soludo. He takes over from Victor Oye.
Article 19(6) of the Constitution 2019, these offices are contested, and their election shall be by voice vote. Those in favor of returning these eminent individuals as National Working Committee members of APUGA say yay. Those against say nay. Yes, all right, the ayes have it.
Now to health matters. The federal government and the striking Joint Health Sector Union will reconvene today in a bid to find a resolution to the ongoing indefinite strike. The National Vice Chairman of JOHASU, Dr. Obinna Ogbonna, disclosed this in an interview. The unions had met with the government last Thursday, but the meeting ended in a deadlock. Members of the union embarked on an indefinite strike last Thursday to press home their demands. Speaking with newsmen, Dr. Ogbonna said they will be meeting with the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment by 12 p.m. today, with the permanent secretary of the ministry set to take charge. The health workers are demanding the immediate approval and implementation of the Technical Committee report on consolidated health salary structure adjustment, the immediate payment of the omission and shortfall in the COVID-19 hazard inducement allowances of affected health workers in federal health institutions, amongst others. To security, 2 days after its inauguration as the executive governor of Kaduna State, Senator Uba Sani has held the first security meeting with heads of security agencies as part of his resolve to engage with them on how to tackle the security challenges confronting the state. The meeting, which was held yesterday behind closed doors inside the governor's office, had in attendance the State Commissioner of Police, the Director of the Department of State Services, DSS, and the Controller of Immigration Service, amongst other security personnel. During the meeting, the governor received briefings on the security challenges arising from banditry, kidnapping, communal disputes, phone snatching, the looming threat of the recent fuel shortage, and the activities of the notorious urban gang popularly known as Sara Suka. Speaking to reporters after the meeting, Governor Sani pledged his administration's total support to security agencies in order to enable them to discharge their duties effectively. He assured the public that his administration would support the security agencies to do their work and at the same time engage the people in the effort of the government to rid the state of all forms of criminality.
By the effort of all the security agencies in Kaduna State, the police, the DSS, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and other security heads, they've been doing very well, and I'm also happy with the level of their coordination. So far so good. We have looked at the situation generally as it affects the citizen. And of course, like I said, we are going to maintain the momentum. We'll support them. But one of the most important areas we discuss is trying to engage the general public.
Moving on, the Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara yesterday sworn in 4 commissioners. The 4 commissioners inaugurated were Professor Zacchaeus Adango, Judge Curly Alabo, Isaac Kamalu, and Professor Chinedum Ummam. All 4 of them were members of the immediate past administration of former Governor Nyesom Wike and were equally reassigned to their previous offices in the Ministries of Justice, Works, Finance and Education. Also sworn in by the Rivers State Governor were the new head of service, Dr. George Nwaike, and a member of the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission, Mberembo Thompson. In his address, Governor Fubara said the exercise is to let the people of the state know that his administration means business. He noted that the task before his administration is enormous and charged the new cabinet members to discharge their duties effectively. Elsewhere, an aircraft of the United Nigeria Airlines yesterday skidded off runway 18L at the Murtala Mohammed Airport Terminal 2 in the Ikeja area of Lagos State. The fewer than 50 passengers were said to be aboard the aircraft that flew in from the Boeing airport in the Abakaliki area of the state. The head corporate communications of the airline, Achilles Chad Uchegbu, in a report said the aircraft landed safely but was forced to terminate its movement to the apron of the runway. It said all passengers disembarked safely and were transported to the arrival hall alongside their luggage. The airline, while reassuring members of the public, said it usually maintains the strictest safety standards in all its operations and shall continue to prioritize the safety of passengers at all times. You're watching Spring News at 12 on Western Spring Television. We will be right back after this break.
War, also known as Ekiti-Parapo War, was waged among Yoruba main ethnic groups which emerged from the ruins of the falling Oyo Empire that were desperate to replace the awesome powers hitherto wielded by the Alaafin of Oyo. The Kiriji War is defined as a conflict of confederacy and unitary political system championed by Yorubas of different socio-economic and political interests. The Ibadan military aristocrats felt they deserved a dominant position for saving Yoruba land from being totally submerged by the Fulanis by their victory in Osogbo War of 1840 and Ijaye War of 1862. Kiriji War, that took its name from the booming motor sounds of European arms festered for so long because the Industrial Revolution in Europe provoked high standards of slaves. The 16-year Civil War also caused the emergence of new powerful kingdoms like Ibadan and the rise of powerful personalities like Oluyole, Ogumola, Koromi, Latosha, Shodeke, Fabumi, and Ogedengbe. One of the fallouts of Kiriji War was the birth of creative political and leadership structure in Yoruba land that was a blend of federalism and the autocratic monarchical system. Western Spring Television identifies Kiriji War as a watershed event. The Berlin Conference of 1884 defined the configuration of Africa, which hitherto existed as a continent of multiple kingdoms and empires under native rulers. The conference, otherwise referred to as Congo Conference, regulated European colonization and trade in Africa as initiated by German leader Otto von Bismarck. The Berlin Conference is often called the scramble for and partitioning of Africa, as each of the imperial powers carved separate portions of the continent for themselves without recourse to racial and cultural identities and differences. 137 years after the Berlin Conference was held, Africa remains a legitimized playground for European nations that sought to exploit its wealth and resources and manipulate its human capital to promote trades and investments of Western powers. Western Spring Television identifies the Berlin Conference as a major event in history.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us right here on News at 12 at Western Spring Television. Talking business, talks between the federal government and the organized labor hit a deadlock yesterday evening as no consensus was reached. The hours-long meeting, which held at the presidential villa, was to, among other things, prevent a labor crisis following the recent increase in petrol pump price occasioned by the discontinuance of petroleum subsidy. The meeting began around 4 p.m. at the Presidential Villa, Abuja. Representatives of the federal government included Dele Alake, the spokesperson for President Bola Tinubu, and the group CEO of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mele Kyari. amongst other government officials. The organized label was represented by the NLC National President Joe Ajaero and the President of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria TUC, Festus Osifo. The National President of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Joe Ajaero, who criticized the removal of subsidy, stated that the status quo must return before any formal engagement with the NLC to protect the Nigerian workforce and prefer additional solutions. The NLC insisted that the federal government did not enter into any conversation, even on palliative measures for Nigerians, hence the rejection of the latest announcement. Meanwhile, Nigerians have called on the federal government to review downwards the new pump price of petrol following today's announcement by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. Olayinka Ale was at the NNPC mega station in Osogbo and now reports.
The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, has jacked up pump prices of petrol PMS by over 200%, bringing the price of fuel to between 488 naira and 557 naira per litre, as speculated in an online publication. This is a new pricing template purportedly sent to marketers by the NNPC management to oil marketers late Tuesday night, and it was directed that the new price adjustments come into effect from today. Report says NNPC stakeholders had a meeting on Wednesday morning and a resolution by the management approved an upward review of the NNPC PMS pump price table for mega standard list stations, instructing all marketers to adjust retail prices for the petroleum products across states. It was gathered that in the new price template, Lagos State has a list price of 488 naira per litre, while Maiduguri and Damaturu have the highest pump prices of 577 naira per litre. On a visit to the NNPC mega station at Ring Road, Osogbo, the Osun State capital, there was no long queue, as it looks like motorists have accepted their fate by buying at 500 naira per litre. Idowu Odewale, who bought for 500 naira, expressed his displeasure and wishes the federal government would regulate the price.
Actually, we bought the fare 500 naira per litre. This is not done. You understand? How can we cope? We bought fare per litre 500 naira. Baba Tinubu, you need to re-strategize.
Titilayo Akonde and Feishayo Ayeni, in the separate interviews, both wished the hike in fuel price was fake news. But alas, reality dawned on them when they got to the fuel station.
In fact, I heard in my office that they've increased the price to 500. I was surprised but I had no choice because I don't have fuel in my car. So that's why I'm just buying the little so that it will just keep me going. But immediately I bought it now, I've made up my mind that for the rest of the week, I won't be taking my car out. I'll just use this one to warm it and keep it at home until maybe when things change.
Honestly, this is killing. 500 naira per litre. That means if I'm to get my car tank filled up, I'm going to spend 35,000 naira. It's a very serious matter. With other things to attend to as far as the country is concerned, this is killing.
It looks as if Wole Olawale is not disturbed about the increase in price of PMS. As he said, everyone would get used to the new price.
Anyway, it's a good thing. They removed the subsidy, but I think we get used to it.
As the NNPC confirmed the adjustments in pump prices of premium motor spirits, known better as petrol, across the country, many Nigerians hope the prices would be readjusted as they consider it outrageous. Olayinka Ali, Westernspring Television News.
Now for news outside Nigeria, Nintendo has said it will no longer sell games in Russia through its online store, as the Japanese giant winds down operations in the increasingly isolated country. The changes, which were announced and came into effect yesterday, follow Nintendo's suspension of product shipments to Russia in March 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine. The company, in a statement, however, said Russia customers can still re-download previously purchased content, but no new payments can be made or new accounts created. It disclosed that payment information tied to Nintendo accounts, such as credit card or PayPal account details, has been deleted for security reasons. A growing number of multinationals have fully or partially halted business in Russia since the Ukraine war began. Still in business, a divided U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill to to suspend the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling yesterday, with majority support from both Democrats and Republicans to overcome opposition led by hardline conservatives and avoid a catastrophic default. The Republican-controlled House voted 314 to 117 to send the legislation to the Senate, which must enact the measure and get it to President Joe Biden's desk before a Monday deadline, when the federal government is expected to run out of money to pay its bills. President Biden, speaking after the vote, said the agreement was good news for the American people and the American economy. He urged the Senate to pass it as quickly as possible so that he can sign it into law. Meanwhile, the Democrat House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries praised the leadership of President Joe Biden after the votes. The measure, a compromise between Mr. Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, drew opposition from 71 hardline Republicans.
And I'm thankful for the leadership of President Joe Biden in avoiding a catastrophic default. I'm thankful for the leadership of President Joe Biden in finding our way to an agreement that will avoid a hostage-taking situation for the balance of the 118th Congress. And I'm thankful for the leadership of President Joe Biden and House Democrats, who protected Social Security, protected Medicare, protected Medicaid, protected veterans benefits, protected education, protected public safety, and protected the American people from the draconian 22% across the board cuts that House Republicans were trying to visit on everyday Americans. And as a result of that effort, that leadership of President Joe Biden, we're going to be able to get through this hostage-taking situation and ensure that we can continue to build an economy that works for everyday Americans. I thank House Democrats for their leadership. I thank House Democrats for their work, and we will continue to show up and stand up and speak up without fear for everyday Americans and to ensure that we can continue America's long, necessary, and majestic march toward a more perfect union. I yield back.
On the foreign scene, President Volodymyr Zelensky pressed his case for Ukraine to be part of the NATO military alliance as it joined European leaders this morning in Moldova. Meeting Moldovan President May Sandu, Mr. Zelensky reiterated calls for Western fighter jets and said his government was preparing a future meeting to discuss Ukrainian peace proposals. The summit of the EU's 27 member states and 20 other European countries at a castle deep in Moldovan wine country was taking place just 12 miles from Ukrainian territory and near the Russian-backed breakaway region of Transnistria. Mr. Zelensky said Kyiv support Moldova and its people who are integrating into the EU, adding that Chisinau's support for Ukrainian refugees who fled in the first days of the war will not be forgotten. At a separate meeting of NATO ministers in Oslo, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said Russia could not veto Ukraine's membership, though Germany said it would not be possible while Ukraine was at war.
Our president said already that we spoke about our bilateral relations, about, I think, some infrastructure, very principal priority projects, and we will sign in the closest future. It's and I think what is very important, our future in EU, and Ukraine is ready to be in NATO. We are waiting when NATO will be ready to host and to see and to have Ukraine. And I think security guarantees are very important.
In Asia, an Australian court has found that Ben Robert Smith, who was awarded the Victoria Cross for his bravery, probably killed unarmed civilians in Afghanistan, as 3 newspapers reported in 2018. Robert Smith, a former soldier with the elite Special Air Services Regiment, SAS, sued the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age and Canberra Times for defamation after they reported he had murdered Afghans during multiple deployments to the country. He claimed the publications had undermined his reputation and made him out to be a man who broke the moral and legal rules of military engagement and disgraced this country and the Australian Army. In a summary judgment read out in Sydney this morning, Judge Anthony Besanko said on the balance of probabilities the respondents had established the substantial truth of several of the allegations, including that in 2012, Mr. Robert Smith kicked an unarmed and uncuffed Afghan man off a cliff and then ordered 2 soldiers in his unit to kill the badly injured man. Elsewhere, NASA has held its first public meeting on UFOs, officially referred to as Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, UAPs, a year after launching a study into unexplained sightings. The space agency televised the 4-hour hearing yesterday, featuring an independent panel of experts who promised to be transparent. The team of 16 scientists and other experts selected by NASA included retired U.S. astronaut Scott Kelly, who spent nearly a year in space. NASA said the focus of the public session at the agency's headquarters in Washington, D.C. was to hold final deliberations before the team publishes a report, which panel chair David Spiegel said was planned for release by late July. Mr. Spiegel said during his opening remarks yesterday that if he were to summarize in one line what has been learned and its need of high-quality data, while the director of All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, Sean Kirkpatrick, called for a more rigorous scientific approach to clarify the origin of hundreds of mysteries.
This is an example of one that I showed at the hearing recently. This is a spherical orb, metallic, in the Middle East, 2022, by an MQ-9. I will come back to the sensor question that David raised here in a moment. This is a typical example of the thing that we see most of. We see these all over the world, and we see these in making very interesting apparent maneuvers. This one in particular, however, I would point out, demonstrated no enigmatic technical capabilities and was no threat to airborne safety. While we are still looking at it, I don't have any more data other than that. And so being able to come to some conclusion is going to take time until we can get better resolved data on similar objects that we can then do a larger analysis on.
Talking sports, Nigeria's Flying Eagles have advanced to the quarter-final of the ongoing FIFA Under-20 World Cup for the first time in 12 years after defeating host Argentina 2-0 at the Estadio San Juan del Bicentenario early this morning. Second-half goals from Ibrahim Mohamed and Rilwan Saki secured a shock win for Leiden Bosso's team. They will now face either Ecuador and South Africa in the quarter-final of the competition in Santiago del Estero on Sunday. Nigeria's win ended a run of 10 straight Under-20 World Cup home victories for Argentina, with the young La Albasti winning all 7 games when they hosted the tournament in 2001 and their first 3 at this edition. Before we end the news, here is a recap of our top stories. The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has reacted to reports claiming that it has devalued the naira to about 630 naira to a dollar. The Presidential Election Petition Court has resumed the hearing of petition filed against the victory of President Bola Tinubu. And on the foreign scene, President Volodymyr Zelensky pressed his case for Ukraine to be part of the NATO military alliance as it joined European leaders this morning in Moldova. Remember to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Westernspring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Westernspring Television. That ends Spring News at 12. I am Evelyn Ohiola. Thank you so much for your time.